How do you know if you have healed? There are three key factors to take into consideration. The first thing is understanding that healing is relative. It's all based on perception and personal expectations. Case in point, I used to be an acrobat in Cirque du Soleil. And as an athlete, in any physical type of activity, but I'm going to keep it to Cirque du Soleil, the gauge for whether or not you had healed or recovered from an injury was if you could be back in the show 100% and perform all your responsibilities. Then you had healed, even if you still experienced pain, because what you would have to do is simply fight the pain while still healing and still going to physical therapy, but you were able to perform in the show. Your injury had healed. So there's an element of relativity, an element of perception that is contingent to the context or the environment and the expectation. Number two, what are you healing from? Is it a physical wound? Is it an emotional wound? Is it both? Again, the Cirque du Soleil example, there is both the physical trauma of a wound, and then there is the emotional trauma that you also have to recover from. I had a career-ending injury where I broke my ankle and my leg at the same time, had multiple surgeries and 2 years of rehab. The emotional wound was heavy. So you're recovering from an emotional wound, which is very hard to gauge and to measure. The physical wound, you're back in the show, you've healed. I was never able to go back to the show. Therefore, the conclusion is that injury never healed. Here I am now, maybe 20 years post career-ending Cirque du Soleil injury. I still have dreams about not being able to get back to my cue in the show. So I still have a level of an emotional wound that is unhealed. Physically, I didn't heal in this particular instance. Emotionally, I haven't healed. Does that mean that I never healed? However, it takes a very different type of resilience, fortitude, courage to navigate, recover, heal from either childhood trauma or narcissist trauma. There is some overlap, but they're very different. During childhood trauma and narcissist trauma, you experience the emotional pain, the emotional damage, you experience the mental damage, but you also experience the physiological transformation, the change in your brain structure and chemistry due to heightened level of cortisol, due to heightened stress in your system, in your nervous system. And so recovering from narcissist abuse or childhood trauma, even though I leverage my Cirque du Soleil experience to somewhat paint a picture to help you understand, there is actually no real comparison. Mental trauma and mental damage, emotional trauma and emotional damage cannot be measured. Nonetheless, there is distinct overlap in the two situations because as a result of either form of trauma, the objective is to get back on your feet. And since the devastation of this career-ending and defining injury, I've been able to continue and live a functioning life and discover new dreams and possibilities, which brings me to point 3 about the true way you can gauge healing. When you've reached a point in your life where the wound no longer prevents you from dreaming, no longer prevents you from giving and sharing. In other words, if you can turn the wound, the trauma, the pain into purpose or beauty, it means you have healed at least sufficiently enough to detach, to no longer be crippled, shackled by the wound. You have found a level of freedom from the trauma. You have transmuted the pain. You are now able to leverage the experience for a bigger, different purpose. When you reach that point where you start to think, wow, I can use this, I feel empowered, maybe that's the true gauge of knowing you have healed.